All right, people are joining in. Hello, wonderful people. We had some thoughts we were just talking about climate change, but I'm here with my friend, your weirdo friend. I will call you my friend. I prefer that to weirdo, even though the word
It's
weird,
okay.
well, weirdo is a good word for me too. It's always been a word that I was always called a weirdo. So I always took it as a badge of identity, but I prefer to call you my friend. So I'll call you my friend. But go ahead and introduce
That's
yourself.
great. Yeah, for me, it's a I don't know if you've heard me say this, but it's one of my favorite movies of all time is A Muppets Family Christmas, which is free on YouTube. And there's this moment where Fozzie Bear's mom refers to Fozzie's friends as your weirdo friends. And then I was just like, this is hilarious. And I had just been reading Timothy Schneider's On Tyranny, where he says to stand out.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't think that
Wow.
people would be interested in this. I'm surprised because in higher ed, I don't even want to say Cassandra because I'm not even that. I'm sure some people listen to Cassandra, but so I was so unused to people listening to me that it never occurred to me when I came on here as your weirdo friend that people would think that I had something to say because I literally work
Yeah.
in a field of higher education in which it doesn't my PhD, my expertise in any number of things does not matter because, the grand machinery of capitalism and white supremacy must hum along undeterred by opinions that are scholarly,
Yeah.
even within the context of higher ed. And so
Yeah.
it's so fascinating that even though we've talked like in my day job, like I've got these national awards. It does not matter at all.
Yep.
It doesn't matter a lick. It doesn't shape people's practice, but I can go on here as your weirdo friend and have more people take me seriously outside of a higher education space than have ever taken me seriously inside of it. As someone who literally came on here as a Muppet. And that
Yeah.
cracks me up because someone put on here, Jason commented Gonzo. And Jason, I wanted to point out that when I first started, and Walt knows this, my icon, I did this fan art of Gonzo. And that's who I was on here for like a really long time. And still, as a literal Muppet, the weirdest one, people listened to me more even when I wasn't on my visage was not on the screen.
Yeah.
And so it's why without knowing my credentials, which I don't lead with because one can be intelligent without
Yeah.
credentials, but yeah, your weirdo friend. But I also did it too because like I feel like white supremacy and fascism requires everyone to be a copy of a copy of a copy, and I wanted to remind people with my name that, as you know, to
Yeah.
sort of love the stranger and to remind themselves of just like you said when people made you know, tortured you with, the weirdness, like used that as a slur or whatever. And it's like,
Yeah.
remember the Muppets, friends. We all grew up with PBS and loving the weird and whimsical.
Yeah.
So,
I've got a couple notes I drove from this. First of all, Cassandra, I always write these fairy stories for my kids, which I think I'm just kinda holding on to the hope because 'cause I've got this stack of manuscripts. It's thousands of pages. I give them, 3 pages 3 days a week, and so we've written this has been going on since 2020. And in one of them, this fairy, she's on a quest and she has to go talk to Cassandra.
oh
And
wow.
Cassandra is like knows that they won't take her seriously. So they have this conversation where Cassandra's trying to lead him to the response that's the truth without actually she's always like, I don't know, it's like so they're asking her questions and Cassandra's just answering with she's being really coy. So I just thought that was kind of a fun thing that you might enjoy hearing about
Yeah.
that. Then it's like, how do you make people listen when people refuse to listen or when you're cursed not to be heard? And so there's a whole chapter where they're doing that. The Muppets, though, too. I've been, I watched the Muppets. I mean, yeah, they've just relaunched it. Somebody mentioned it. Well, we watched the new one, and it's still I prefer the old ones because they were so strange. But yeah, that embracing how you're different, and it's been a fight for my whole life, and it's just sort of like it's just so much easier when you're just like, yeah, I'm different, and that's a good thing. So, and listen, and a part of listening to you that you mentioned, because I'd heard about you and I'd seen you, but it wasn't. I was actually out skiing and I was just listening to Substack and your talk about I forget what it was. I think you were just talking about rejecting violence and it was just instant. Within like 2 minutes, I'm like, "Oh, this person knows what they're talking about." And it's just I think that's really cool. I've always found this too when I was teaching. The second I speak straight to my kids, they just listen and behavioral things are no longer an issue. But if you're trying to get them with that authoritarian white supremacy bullshit where you have to take the narrative over the facts, which is basically maybe the easiest way you can describe white supremacy, you have
Mhm.
to adhere to the narrative over whatever the facts say. And it's in every part of our institutions. I mean, you've seen it too.
Yeah.
And you're just talking about it. So yeah, but I mean, you were telling me about your qualifications, and I was just like, oh, that makes sense. But it's like just having listened to you, I'm like, Jesus, you're like, this person knows what they're talking about. I'm like, yeah, that's true, that's true, that's true. So I was just kind of delighted to have listened to you and accepted you prior to hearing any of the qualifications.
Yeah, yeah, and I actually, as a general rule, when people ask me what I do, I'm just like, "I'm a teacher," and then they're like, "What grade?" And I'm like, "College." Because
Yeah,
and part of it is because in the United States, there is such horrible anti-intellectualism, and the further you stray from the archetype of, like, the straight white man professor with the dusty
yeah,
elbow patches, it's like the immediate hatred of an educated, marginalized person, it can sour even people who claim to love education, and
yeah,
it's really sad because I think that people immediately revert back to the space of, "Oh, you think that you know more than me," and to that, I'm gonna say this, which is that eh, as you know, Walt, I'm sure that intellect is not about your intelligence has nothing to do with the accumulation of facts. It is your ability to be curious about the world around you.
yeah,
And that's it. And so it's so sad and I think indicative of white supremacy culture in and of itself that we assume that intellect has something to do with this accumulation of facts, and those who have accumulation of facts are somehow better than other people, and it's just such a frivolous, a stupid calculus because every
yeah,
person is a genius in some way that like the other person is not, and it's bananas to me that we have used in the United States this injurious notion of education to turn people off from it. And I'm not surprised because I mean like we lie to the people of the United States have been lied to since time immemorial, right? I mean it's like you said, narrative over
fact.
evidence,
Yeah. Mhm.
just truly bananas.
That's something I've thought about a lot too, and I think a lot of it comes because I just have been talking a lot lately because I grew up in this rural community, and I struggled a lot in school at first just because they indoctrinate you so much, and I think but I really do know the conservative mindset, and I really wish more people would use me as a resource to kinda extract. Because I was saying it's like the opposite, the traveling into the heart of darkness, as I've come out from there, I don't necessarily wanna go back in there, but I do know how they think, and I know where their vulnerabilities are, and that's why I get frustrated with the silver spoon Democrats who keep trying to advocate decorum over the fact
Mm.
that there are vulnerabilities we can exploit, you just have to stop ignoring people like me. But I think the authoritarian model of school, I mean, because they set up these systems that are designed to to self-sabotage.
Yeah, they're like
They make
prisons.
I'm sorry?
They're
Yeah,
like prisons.
yep, and you have to obey the central authority figure, and questions aren't celebrated. So it's natural that people would be resentful of education after coming to our public school system because conservatives have made our public school system such torture instruments, torture chambers, and it's all part of their overarching plan to erode respect for intellectualism and just scientific knowledge or expertise. And somebody pointed out the other day that the country, like literacy rates have dropped like in an astonishing amount over the
Mhm.
last 10 years.
From No Child Left Behind, which was intentionally, like, the opposite, right? They wanted to cut down reading, and it's structured reading time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all intentional, and that was like yeah, yeah. So what is the weakness, a central weakness of that you think
Oh,
to exploit in,
well, a lot of it is just, I always say they have absolutely no abilities whatsoever. And what you really see with this president in particular, his constant deflections, he has no talents. There's not a single thing. And the only reason, because people will say, well, he's a marketing genius. He's not. What he
"Oh, he's
is a
dumber than a bag
coward.
of rocks."
What?
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
I
What
just
would
said
you
he's
say?
dimmer than a bag of rocks, but please
Yes.
continue.
Well,
Do go on.
what he's effective at, and I've seen this at other people, is like these white supremacists, they get to that point where they have that identity of superiority, so they cannot lose a contest ever. So
Mm.
what eventually they don't even submit to being evaluated under any circumstances. So that's
Mm.
why you get even his minions when they're like, "Do you trust what the president says?" They say, "Well, he's the president." They say that. And it's just like, just say you trust him. But it's just that constant deflection. Anything when it's held to like a kind of standard, it's because, but he comes off as this blustering bully. He comes up blustering. So what you do with bullies, and too many of our silver spoon Democrats are like, "Oh God, he's gonna hit me. He's gonna," and it's like, all right, let's have a fight then. Because a bully doesn't want to fight because that's a contest. Like something that's essentially, so if you push back, they collapse like a house of cards. And it's like we just have to get to this point. Because it's like those denials for, it's like, let's just have evidence. And it's like that applies to the vote. 2024, we have absolutely every right to say, let's do a hand recount. It's like you're saying that there's this problem with the SAVE Act and there's all this voter fraud. All right, let's check the 2024 election, do hand recounts, make sure voting integrity is there. No, they say. So anything that actually is proof, they just wriggle away from. So just
Right.
hold them to proof.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. And I think you're right because, you could say, oh, so you want to do this thing where, I mean, the other piece too is that the SAVE Act is not about protecting elections, as we all know. But like, I
Yeah.
feel like it's good to sort of not sane wash this, to
Yeah.
ungaslight, right? To turn off the gaslight and be like, listen,
Yeah.
um,
Expose their lie is what we need to
the
do.
United States government knows who in this country is a citizen and who is not a citizen. And the United States has, the Republican Party itself has uh, rejected national identification. So that there is no way to determine who can vote in elections, leaving that to the states. And now that they're losing elections, they want people to prove a thing that the government already knows. Because they know that the prevailing majority of the people will not have the identification. And I think that they're relying on the calculus that um, it is only going to be like the very wealthy who have passports, right? And we already know that Mark Elias talks about this, that Donald Trump began his career and calling into question the veracity of Barack Obama's birth certificate,
Yeah.
and then inventing this, when he produced it, he's like, no, there's a long form one when there was in fact not. And so, I mean, we see the game here. There is no there is no meeting these assholes in the middle.
Right.
I
Uh-huh.
think even just sort of seating, I mean, I'm at the point where it's like, stop listening to this
Yeah.
anyone who is propping up this illegitimate government in any kind of way,
Yeah.
um,
Absolutely.
but through its participation, it's like, because I don't, I feel like, we're at the point where we really just need to starve the
Yes.
government of people's consent.
And what I see too often is people on the left conceding these just absurd statements that those on the right make. And what we can do is we can go on the offensive with that and just and like they hate the follow-up question. What you said before about curiosity, like I was the weird one because I was just asking follow-up questions like, wait a minute. And you notice pretty early on, if you're a curious person, the contradictions of everything in the conservative mindset. So the more you go, but they make it like the whole conservative ideology is to respect authority, just do what they tell you to do and don't ask any questions back. So if we
Yeah.
can just dismantle that by saying, but wait a minute, you just said to do this, that contradicts with what you said here. Which is it? And you just kind of take them to task. And so many of our Democrats, out of this outdated sense of decorum, they refuse to do that. They refuse to make these, just make them squirm a little bit by using their own language and using their own statement. And that's why I said, it's like, oh, you think elections are insecure? Okay, let's go back and do a hand recount of 2024. No, they'll say. And it's just like, wait a minute. You think this is so important? You're pushing through this whole legislation. I mean, why are you not? And then they'll start getting angry. And so it's just also familiarizing yourself with their responses. And you were the one, I think it was your wonderful comments, I think it was, where they try to provoke that anger response. So you're using the fear part of your brain
Mhm.
rather than your rational response.
Mhm.
And so once you just learn that those tactics of their rhetoric, and then because they force us into submission, and we've all been indoctrinated to respond a certain way. once we teach ourselves not to do that, we instantly get such a surge of power that people wouldn't believe it.
Oh, for sure. I mean, the one thing that I would sort of say yes and is that and this is just me, extending to this. I think that many of us have a perception of the fascism within conservatism. But there is also fascism within spaces of people who like to call themselves progressives. And I have experienced this writ large in higher education, that same thing of these people that are like, oh, I voted for Biden. And then the moment that you're like, hey, so
Oh,
our policy says this about discrimination and this is what's happening and this is what the law is. Do you think that maybe we want to align our practices so that we're not doing some discrimination? And they're like, how dare you? You are so
yep,
disrespectful. You are so divisive. And that is
yep,
fascism. And I
yep,
think that we
yep.
are here in this moment because people have this sense that fascism only belongs on the side of conservatism when it is in fact this kind of power hoarding structure in which a number of people believe that they are better than other people. And that's the part that just really chaps my ass, if you
Yeah,
will. And I also, to your point, as I say, chaps my ass on purpose, is that decorum is white supremacy culture and always has been. It is literally there so that because when you remove the emotional temperature, and I always think that, energy should be alchemized, but when what decorum
yeah,
does is it requires you to mute your emotional response to injustice. It is not about politeness. It is not about it is about oiling the machine of oppression to keep it going. And I just, as somebody who studies persuasion, I'm just like, fuck, like,
yeah, yeah,
just because because I think that we are here because many people have been propagandized to thinking
yes,
that the red team is just the fascists and the blue team are just, these great, sweet
yeah,
people. And it's like, no, like every person has a propensity to fall into fascism.
yeah,
It does not have a political party. And we've been seeing that, right? I mean, we've
yeah.
been in a fascist country for a very long time for Black people and First Nations people and for trans people.
Mhm.
Um, you know, yikes
Yes.
on bikes.
Yeah, and that's what everybody has to understand. You start with that understanding that we don't have any liberal representation in the United States. Everything is conservative. And yes, underlying our entire identity, and this is what I've been working through, like removing the white supremacy conditioning that we're all subjected to, no matter where you are on whatever political spectrum there is. And this, I'll talk about this a lot with Will Fullwood. And he says, as a racialized black man, he's been indoctrinated too with the beliefs of white supremacy. So we get to that point where if you have a reasonable question, I've encountered this a lot in my life. You have a reasonable question about something, authority figures will become hostile in some instances. And that's exactly what you're talking about. Like, how dare you say that? It's like, wait, okay, I'm legitimately not understanding. Could you explain to me why? And that hostility is don't look so close at this point. And a lot of it is becomes people that are otherwise, and this is something that's really interesting because I've spent a lot of my life, really hard indoctrinated in conservative rural community where I'm just like, and I couldn't eat and I couldn't breathe in this place. It was very bad for my health, but there was no model of like compassion. Like, how do I, and I always say, it's just a negative space where compassion should have been. It's taken out of my brain. And I spent all my time in the woods and in books, but really not happy. And like, this is not good. And it wasn't until I was 26 and I moved to Peru. I'm just like, I'm going to either die or I'm out of here. I'm going to go try anything else. Living in South America outside of a white supremacy state like we have in the United States allowed me to reprogram my mind. And what you find is a lot of your basic assumptions about humanity in as an American citizen have been tainted by white supremacy ideology in pursuit of that decorum you were talking about. So people in the United States say, well, people have always exploited each other and racism has always existed. Like these things are human nature rather than the fundamental evils of white supremacy that's put into kids. And once you scrape that, you have to get in there and scrape it off, like tartar off your teeth. And then you get a worldview that allows you to examine these contradictions without becoming hostile yourself or becoming emotional or becoming frustrated. And it manifests in a lot of people because these people are like, oh, they're saying, I'm so disappointed in Thomas Massey for voting for the same act. SAVE Act. And it's like, your disappointment shows there's something wrong in your mind because you should have known he would have done that. Why are you anticipating that he would behave a different way? And I went through this change after the 2024 election because I was angry and frustrated up to the election. And then I feel the election was stolen because a white supremacist would never let a black woman win. And then instead of being angry at that point, I was just like, accepted. Okay, this is a corrupt country. I accept that now in my heart. And since then, I've had a lot more power and I'm able to evaluate these situations without these weird assumptions and feeling disappointed. Because now I know it's like everything that I'm watching confirms what I know to be true rather than having to look at things that contradict what I think are true and then having to suffer that cognitive dissonance. So just
Yes.
removing, yeah, go ahead and speak. I'm just chatting.
Yes, no, I think that you are, I mean, let's just be clear. I mean, it is one of my central critiques of Mark Elias, is he's like, well, I'm not. If you are, and I appreciate his work, and I also disagree with him about, and I this is this myth. Let me just back up more and more and more and more and more. White supremacists have always stolen elections in the United States.
Yeah, yes.
God damn it. I mean,
Yep.
we did it. Brian Kemp was the Secretary of State in Georgia. Stacey Abrams fucking won that election. She should be governor right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry for my,
No,
but
you're
like
right. Be angry. We should be angry.
but it's just but there's this myth. It's the decorum myth that like we all are just going to pretend that
Yeah.
that mechanisms are not rigged all the time, including the Democratic Party rigging the context
Primaries.
between Bernie Sanders and
Yep.
Hillary Rodham Clinton, right?
Yep.
Um, it was very clear that Bernie was going to win, and white supremacy culture cannot have that. No, no. And
Yep.
so you know, we get just more fascism as a result of that because people were at that point in time at their breaking point and needing some sort of
Yep.
relief from a system that is siphoning their well-being and energy from them. And they tried to shame people out of articulating their economic needs and their need for a sense of
Yep.
collectivity and purpose. And they said, oh, well, you're just a sexist. I mean, literally, I had people calling me, a Bernie bro. And I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
first of all,
Yeah.
behold all of the lack of broness around my general area. But like it didn't matter. It's and that's gaslighting too.
Yes, it
That
is.
is also gaslighting.
Well, then notice what they DNC did too. They blamed Bernie. They said, first of all, they say we can't go too far left. He's too much of a socialist. They'll never vote for him. And then they simultaneously blamed him for eroding votes that would have gone to Bernie. It's like, wait a minute, you just admitted that there is appeal to Bernie Sanders' message among the right. And there are so many people that would just, and these are liberal blue voters who would crash out at me when I was trying to promote. It's like, look, I just pointed out a very clear contradiction in what you just said. You consider yourself a highly intelligent person who evaluates the fact, and they're crashing out. And I mean, this is just a new, I've been talking about this in a lot of different ways, but this is kind of a new way. That cognitive dissonance that we get among people on the left. And I'm spending more, like the guys on the right, I didn't even think about. They're just, it's like, okay, they're not even the problem. It's these guys on the left who maintain these systems of injustice, thinking that they're doing the right thing. They have themselves conditioned to think that this is, well, change has to be slow. I mean, those whole lines are just complete bullshit. And they'll lecture me. And I'm the one who grew up among conservatives and made this hard trek, with absolutely no help from the heart of darkness to like a place where I could be a rational help, and they completely disregard me and they listen to some silver spoon Democrat who gives money to people who say openly racist things like James Carville, and they wonder why they don't have a big tent. And that the big tent stuff never includes me, right? It's like what you said just pushed me out of your big tent. Well, you have to come in. You have an obligation to come in. It's like, why aren't you doing what you're preaching? Why aren't you appealing to me? Why are you lecturing to me to come into the big tent while you're just begging for Klansmen and bullshit to come into the tent? And it's like, you can't, these conversations are unreal.
Yeah, I mean, the both of our parties protect wealth.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I want to just be clear that I do not think that Kamala Harris would have sent the military out on people.
Oh,
I don't
no
think
way.
that. I mean, there are a number of things. So hear me when I say that that two things can be true at the same time. Both of these parties protect wealth, and also.
Oh, yeah.
Not only did I vote for Kamala Harris, but I also volunteered for Kamala Harris, which is a lot more than a lot of these shame on you people
Yeah.
for critiquing the Democrats.
Yeah.
But I feel like I live as a marginalized person with a bit of Stockholm syndrome because Democrats know, and James Carville just said it out loud. I swear to God, the older white
Like,
men get, the more brazen they get because he's just like, oh, we don't have to change anything about ourselves. We just need to let a number of people die and to see how depraved these people are, and they'll come crawling back to us. I mean, if your party hinges upon subjecting people to abuse but doing nothing to change substantively what you
yeah.
fucking stand for,
Yeah.
like burn it all to the ground. And I don't really mean actually burn it all to the ground. What I mean is we've got these
Yeah.
two levers and I've talked about this before. And so like what I mean is that like I don't know if you've seen this. The you probably I realize I'm on here sharing stories a lot, but I think that we've got two levers: the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. And if you're in a red state, I think that you should run a sleeper candidate who is a
Yeah.
Republican on the same freaking message. And the same thing with Democrats: just run these people and pull all the goddamn levers, and then take over both caucuses. You
Uh,
know. Because to me, it's like when a hornworm is on a tomato plant and the tomato plant sends out messages that says, "Hey, this is killing me," and then the wasp comes in and says, "Okay, I will lay my eggs inside that hornworm and eat it out from the like eat it alive from the inside." And that's what we need to do to these parties: is hollow those fuckers out
yeah.
and fill them with people who actually give a shit about people. Because I think half of the people who understand themselves as rabid MAGAs, yeah, many of them are racist. And also, I would argue that many of them have been encouraged to filter the world through racism and sexism and transphobia and
Yeah.
all the other isms because it is the thing that the fascist elite hand down to the plebs. At least you're
Yeah.
better than these other people.
And it's I'd actually kind of toyed with the idea of like launching a campaign as like just an extreme Republican because I can, if they want me to like in a satirical way just spew all their hate rhetoric, I think I could. It would be interesting to get into a primary with like a bunch of other Republicans and just yell at. You could do it like the downside of this would be that if people didn't know that they were in on the gag, you'd look like just the most reprehensible person in the world. But I feel I could get on the stage with all those jerks and like shame them for not being like evil enough and probably win an election. And then you're like, surprise, I'm a progressive. I'm going to vote for, you're like,
Yeah,
ah, but, yeah,
yeah,
and then, yeah, but then the Democrats turning around. I wanted to say, if they always blame the voter, it's like at some point, it's like we gave you all the power in 2020 to stop this, and you're still blaming us. We gave you that power, you jerks. But the other thing I want to say is about the conservative mindset, especially the young ones, the kids, because I grew up with so many of these kids, and it's like it's really hard for a kid who's like 10 to be in a family with an abusive dad and like this, and the mothers have basically had all the life taken out of them. They've had to endure else so many, that you can't even hardly reach them. And I've been at the house of these kids, and they can tell that like they so want to have a friend who's a nice friend, but you can see just in the way they behave, they're hiding the reality about things. Like they know that shame. It's like when a kid takes everything from their room and stuffs it in their closet and spends their whole time holding the closet door closed. They're like, "Hey, come over. It's so good to have you here." And they start like planning the future, like the other things because they're so lonely. I mean, this is the thing. It's like it makes my heart break for the young ones that still have a chance because they're like planning that we can do all these fun things, we can do all these fun things, and then the door opens and you see the true horrible reality of all the things that they believe, and they're appalled by it, and then you're like, I'm out of here, and then they have nothing left but to turn to that hatred. I mean, it's as children, I have pity for them. As adults, they need to be locked up. Is basically how I think about it.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think yeah. I mean, and I really do think that, and I I'm not just saying this because I study, like, persuasion, but, like, so much of white supremacy is down to an emotional stuntedness,
Yes.
and I feel like, um that's why I get so pissed off about there's, like, some sort of MIT business professor, bald guy, skinny, I don't know, he's, like, super famous and everyone fucking laps up his bullshit, and he talks about the male loneliness epidemic, and I just wanna smack the polish off of his freaking head when he says it, because he says this thing about the loneliness epidemic as if the solution is for women and femmes and other marginalized people to just want less and to lower the bar. And it's like, no,
Yeah.
you fool. Maybe men need to engage in fucking emotional literacy.
Yeah, no kidding. And that's and then when they start talking about male loneliness, it's like, well, are women lonely too? I mean, nobody ever just is like, maybe they're lonely too. And all the other marginalized groups. How come you only are focusing on how white men are feeling? What maybe that's why, like you just said. But yeah, and a
Yeah.
lot of this because I think about my dad a lot with this because he there were just doors of perception that he just kept perpetually closed. And you even if you tried to crack open a door and like go through that a little bit and just said, hey, let's have a conversation about things. Absolutely not. And it's because if your perception of reality, if you impose these psychological boundaries, you end up in this safe space where then you can feel powerful. And if you happen to open the door and recognize, and his story is always he didn't want to get a puppy because then you just fall in love with a puppy and it dies and you feel bad. And that was his like viewpoint about life. And it's like, yeah, but what about the decade you have with this lovely companion and all the memories you get to carry for the whole rest of your life? Nope. They want to be because they're so terrified. And that's the other thing about these white supremacists. They're terror. We shouldn't be afraid of them because they're so afraid. And all we have to do is provoke that fear through humiliation. It was Lefty Prof. I would say it's really effective to use humiliation against white supremacists because they're so afraid. That's why they wear their hoods. They only wear masks when it comes to Klan rallies and ice raids, right? That's what we get about the white supremacists. But yeah, they're so afraid. They shut everything off. They shut off every chance of having decency because they want that security of a controlled reality that doesn't exist. And that's why they don't perceive any reality beyond what exists within that safe boundary. So it's something you have to knock down. It's something I had to learn the hard way because I got very far along where I was groomed to think like that for a long time. And I did have to overcome that conditioning that made me see people as less, and it requires opening those doors. And then you're like subjected to now I can't control everything anymore. And it's like that hits you hard. But it hit me when I was like 20. If you're trying to make a person who's 60 get hit by that, it'll probably, knock them out.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I think that yeah, I mean, I think that, when you and the answer is you're not supposed to be able to control everything, you know? I
Yeah.
mean, like, it's a profoundly fearful stance to think that, you are meant to control everything that happens, and also, it's like, if you this is the part that is so wild to me, is that white supremacy controls
Yes.
women, femmes, trans people, queer people, um, all black and brown people,
Yeah.
and then and then they wonder why they are fucking lonely. It is because they literally
Yeah.
require and demand people to literally parrot back what they've said, and then they say to themselves, "Why am I so lonely?" Well, maybe it is because you have substituted the richness of life for this fiction of control that was always going to fall on itself. And yeah, people who have the
Yeah.
ability to walk away will walk away. And what we are seeing right now are white Christian nationalists who want to take away everyone's ability to fucking walk away.
Yeah, yeah. I keep saying when it comes to that, I keep saying white supremacy is a branch of Christianity. It is a defilement of Christianity, but they all come from the same tree. And I would like to try this is one of my tactics as we try to build our better community because I do know that there are some I've always I don't I've had a hard relationship with Christians because a lot of them have treated me very badly. But in this, I've gotten so desperate in the last couple months that I've been calling up the local churches, and I found a couple that actually will listen to me and that will hear my concerns. And I've been telling them this. immigrants are Roman Catholics. The ones who come up from South America, they're Roman Catholics. This Republican regime is waging a religious war and it's arresting Catholics. And if we can try to invoke the various churches, if the churches, rather than say, do you renounce Satan and all his works, if we can get them to say, do you renounce white supremacy? So people at least start talking about it. I mean, I'm just scrapping for victories anywhere I can find them. Like I said, I don't know if it's
No, I think
appropriate.
that's actually beautiful work. I love, I mean, like I know I've read some of your stuff where you have talked about, it's so interesting. Like, I think, if I had not been, I mean, while it is true that I was like raised Catholic, like my dad is Lenape. And he was Jewish before he married my mom. So like the confluence of First Nations and Judaism and
Oh, wonderful.
Catholicism does something to a person where I haven't really like felt
Yeah.
in, steeped in Christianity culture. So for me, it's like I am abstained from the belief in it, and so I find that there are thinkers that I really appreciate, but I think it is so courageous of you as someone who has been so injured by the white supremacy that comes out of this white Christian nationalist space to then be calling up other churches and saying, do you reject the evils of white supremacy? Listen, they are coming after you, because it is absolutely true. And I say this as someone who has also studied white Christian nationalists. They don't just want a Christian nation, sweetheart. They want a, not you, sweetheart, but like everybody,
Yeah.
they want a nation in which only the people who believe what they believe are legitimate Christians. And I have heard
Yes.
this from their mouths, not just on the screen, but in person. Like, if you do not believe what they believe, if you are not saved in the way that they think you should be saved, and that can always be changed,
Yeah.
right? Salvation is on a sliding scale. They don't see you as human. Like, it annoys the ever living shit out of me that people think that white Christian nationalists are just want Christianity. That is not what they want.
Yeah. And they're in plain sight because they say this has always been a Christian nation when it verifiably hasn't, but it always has been a white supremacy nation. And then because white supremacists always hide, they use camouflage, they use their dog whistles. So instead of saying that they're white supremacists, they're like, I'm a Christian. And yes, and it's like the fact that it's another one of these decorum things. We're just not allowed. We've been indoctrinated not to call out. And it's the opinionated ogre has had wonderful conversations about this, where whiteness the crimes of whiteness are allowed to remain hidden. Where they'll talk about black on black crime, but if you mention white on white crime, they freak the hell out, because they just want. And that's why when people say, they'll say America has no culture. The culture of America is white supremacy. That's what the culture of the country is. And so many people, even now, they just refuse to use the words to denounce white supremacy, to recognize the danger of it. And that's why we're here, because people are just, and we've got the blinders on. It's like so many Americans have their blinders on. And that too is a consequence of white supremacy conditioning. I was talking about that the other day, where I grew up believing, okay, here's an obstacle. I'll just find a way around this obstacle. And rational people, that's what we do. We're like obstacle, obstacle, because we've been trained to think, oh, obstacles are just part of life. But what we need to recognize, those are artificial obstacles, and it's our obligation to tear those obstacles down so that the people that come behind us can go forward unimpeded. So this requires a massive reconstruction of how you view your reality, where you embrace this idea of, yes, tearing down, stop believing that these obstacles are an act of nature rather than an artificial construct, and take the power to rip them down for the benefit of the people. They aren't helping anybody. It doesn't help people to have to overcome these absurd things. So we can advance much farther if we're not having to crawl over. Let's pave the way for our kids and for society. So that's what it takes, is reprogramming our minds to stop going around obstacles and taking those obstacles down.
Right, right. Yeah. I mean, and looping back to, I mean, like, God. So I mean, like, one of them is that, like, in the United States, like, Christianity, the brand of Christianity, not all of it, but the brand is this deification of straight white men.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And the other part, and going back to it has always been like a white supremacist nation. Yeah, the moment that Turtle Island was colonized by these immigrants
Yeah,
who laid waste to their neighbors. Because of their own trauma and their own fucking bullshit and what they left. But like one of the things that I wanted to point out is that like race and gender were both constructs of colonialism. And this is actually really, really important because there's a moment in US history, and this comes from if you're interested in the book, it's by well, there are two scholars who talk about this, everyone who's listening, Janet Jacobson and Anne Pellegrini. But there was a moment before we have racialized terms where they would refer to people in the colonies as Christians versus strangers. And so it was this idea that like anyone, so those were the racialized, so it was like
yeah.
a pre-racialization term, right? But like
Okay.
when you talk about it's always been a white supremacist nation, even before they had the branding for white supremacy, they were using Christianity
Yeah.
as a stand-in to decide who belonged and who didn't. So
Yeah.
again, Gina Jacobson and Pellegrini, this is
Interesting.
not they have a really lovely book that they wrote for their students in religious studies called "Love the Sin," because that white
Okay.
Christian nationalist phrase "hate the sinner, love the" or sorry, "hate the sin, love the sinner," which is so ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
But and the whole point of it is wonder if this entire construct of morality is really meant to sort of prop up the power of like white supremacy. Like what does that give us? And it's a lovely book. It's very challenging, but it's also like very um it gives you breathing room.
Mhm. Well, I find it's fascinating too, because another argument of white supremacy, they'll say, well, slavery, they'll say racism and slavery have always existed, and they'll cite the Bible, but the slavery in the Bible is punishment. It's not race based, and so that's the thing where it's like this all become comes up because we don't teach about these things in our schools at all. We don't teach real American history. But I think it was Pope Alexander the Sixth, right after the discovery of the continent, so like 1493 or so, where he left this papal decree saying you can enslave heretics, and then once these heretics started figuring out, oh gee, we can get out of slavery if we convert to Christianity, then they're like, oh shoot, we're making so much money on slaves, we have to invent a new reason. And so I would say they retrofitted the Bible with the story, the curse of Ham, to make the black community, they equated skin color with sin. And so yeah, but I mean that evolution, I mean, it's sick, de-evolution, I guess you should say. And then, it goes from how the slave culture changed. I mean, we don't think about these things, but there are decades where it got progressively worse until you get to the rape farms after the slave trade was abolished, and the development of the white supremacy comes later. I kind of look at the cornerstone speech as the founding document of white supremacy at the end or at the beginning of the Civil War, because I mean it's just then it's because what you got is racism and that slave mentality and that superior mentality festering, and then you add the grievance of just being humiliated in the Civil War, and so then we get this new white supremacy culture. So these things are just getting, and so we're just at the end of this. I mean, hopefully, as people say, this is the extinction burst of this toxic strain that has been here on this continent since and since the Europeans first stole it and committed genocide on these lands, I guess is the fairest way to say that. Hopefully, we're finally getting, because we can either have the human race or we can have decorum for white supremacy, but that'll kill us. So I choose the
Right.
human race.
Right. And I mean to wit too, like speaking of extinction bursts, I mean like I as someone who is in the abattoir, I find myself a little infuriated by and this isn't directed at you, but I hear that phrase coming out of white masculinity, progressive masculinity. Oh, that rich is I think become famous for
Oh, the
circulating a
extinction
video
burst
that
thing.
talks about that. And what I would say to people who believe that is to ask themselves who dies in that radius blast of the extinction burst,
Yeah,
because right now, women are overrepresenting white men out on the lines of standing in the face of masked paramilitary with guns, as are queer people,
yeah,
as are trans people. And I just um, feel a lot of fury because I think that people like Oh That's Rich are circulating, whether he means to or not, and I don't think it's malicious, but I think that he thinks that this will just course correct. It's just a gentler version of James Carville, frankly, to
Oh,
say,
that's
oh, it's an
interesting.
extinction burst, and this will all end on its own. This will not end until white men leave their
Yeah.
screens and get out into the streets and start standing shoulder to shoulder with the people who are actually standing in the breach right now.
Mhm.
And so, and I say this too because like white supremacy culture and white Christian nationalism, we are also experiencing a poly crisis of extinction. We have literally a decade of maybe a decade of normal living before we have an ecological collapse where billions
Yeah.
of people will die, right? And life as we know it, it, it will
Yeah.
completely change. So like, so it really behooves people who do not like what they're seeing to leave their screens, get out into their communities, and do the humble work of community organizing. And you don't need to know what to do. You just need to find the other people in your neighborhood who are doing it and take marching orders instead of pontificating as much, you know?
Yeah. Oh, that's so useful, and I hadn't considered it from that perspective, so I really appreciate that you shared that. I was just looking at it as just like a theory of hopefulness. It's like, you know, that we're gonna emerge victorious from this, but I see what you're saying too, and one of the things I've been really trying to do is just try to find the messaging. Cause like, you get that white face, you're trying to tell them something, and then they just give you that face of, "I'm no longer listening," and trying to figure out that gap to activate the white population, to get them to actually be involved in this, and one of the things I've experimented with a lot of things. I'd be out skiing, and I was just saying, "Justice for good, people," and referring to ICE. It's like, "We need justice," but it's like, it's just a 'cause it needs to be a positive statement, I think, because I started out being like, "End ICE," and then people would get mad. So if you make it positive, you're like, "Justice for good," then people are like, "What are you trying to say to me?" And it's like, I want you to think about these things. But, like, the different forms of messaging, and like you said too, just actually listening, and I mean, this is the thing, I've had this benefit of my wife being from South America, and she has to remind me often that I don't see the world as she does. I'm seeing it through the eyes, and I really work hard on this, and I've worked hard on this for all these years. And I'll say, even today, I have to learn a lot, and I have to hold myself accountable all the time. And it's been wonderful being on these Substack lives and being able to talk to different people from different
Yeah.
areas and get a better perspective. But yeah, and I feel I do have this because I can go talk to certain white people and they'll listen to me. They wouldn't listen to you. They wouldn't listen to Will Fullwood. They wouldn't listen to my wife. But figuring out the conversation that I need and the rhetorical tactics I have to use to get through that white denial, and that white I'll just go around things, or that white wishful thinking. There's all these things, and to just activate them to do the right thing, yeah, that's a challenge. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah, no, I mean it's so real. Actually, it was there's this really wonderful. All right, so I don't know if you follow the Conscious Lee on Substack,
I
but
know the name, yeah.
he has this really lovely piece out that talks about white supremacy and the trick of time, and that one of the central mechanisms that white supremacy culture uses is hope to constantly defer the action that would
Mm.
actually change the
Yeah,
system.
yeah, yeah,
And so I think about this moment where people are still hoping that like we will have sort of the whoever the person was in the face of McCarthy who said, at long last have you no decency, sir. That moment is not there. Like there is no
yeah,
Republican that is going to self-correct. It literally there is no one in the Democratic Party that is like people literally have to, outside of the levers of power, decide to literally put on the brakes and say, no,
yeah,
we are not doing shit anymore. And all the stuff that you normally provide to us, we are going to provide to each other until you all flee like fucking
yeah,
cockroaches from the machinery. And then we will take it over because that is literally the only option left for us. And I think that so many people
yes,
want to believe that we will have. I mean, even like people don't math it out. Okay, let's say that we end up overwhelming the system and we end up having a House of Representatives that are filled,
yeah,
that are slates of Democrats. one, Donald Trump will challenge those elections, and Mike Johnson, who absolutely wants all this to go down, will not seat those people, right? Not to mention the fact that even if Mike Johnson were overwhelmed by his own constituency, then you would have an armed paramilitary force go in there and arrest the entire Congress, the congressional body. I mean, like, we are at that point, and it is annoying to me that
Yeah.
we are slowed down by the denial of, frankly, straight, white, cisgender
Yes.
people who live in hope
Yep. Yep.
all the time while the rest of the people are dying around them,
Yeah.
because we don't have to live in hope. We could be living in action.
Yeah, and delay is a tactic. Like the white supremacists, if they can't get the win, then they'll just delay you getting one. And if they switch instant and no battle is too small for them, no item is too trivial, and they wear decent people down because we're just like, just let them have their way, which is what we have to overcome. That's what we have
Right.
to get to. And then I get so many people will rouse themselves to come after me for trying to hold them accountable rather than recognize that what I'm saying is it's like what we have to stand up. Like making kids say the Pledge of Allegiance is fucking white supremacy. That has to be stopped too. We have to start having these fights. We can't let them erase books. We can't let them erase academic theories. We can't let them fire our teachers. And I called up my daughter's teacher, got into some hot water because she was handing out a know your rights card. And I called up the school and I said, I want her to do that. And I called up the teacher. I said, thank you. And she says, thank you so much for saying that. You gave me the strength to come to school today. But had I not acted, then we lose another teacher, and that's another victory for white supremacy. The other
Yeah.
side of that is we do need to I do feel at least we do have to hope. It can't be completely hopeless. We do have to reserve for ourselves some thought that we can win this. So that has to be there. But you're right. It gets fed to people like a opiate. And so then they don't have to act. Oh, somebody else will take care of it. And
Right.
yeah, all we have to do, cancel all your subscriptions. We're the ones that do all the work. Stop funding. It's like even now, all these people funding the rich assholes on Substack. It's like you got to fund the people that are actually fighting for you, not the status quo assholes who are just here to get rich. And what you're saying is actually right, or is
Yeah.
so right. Yeah, they
Well,
can just refuse to seat all the people. What's going to happen at that point? Yes.
yeah, yeah, and I think the thing about hope is it invites inaction, in some ways, right? At least in this culture. But what you can have is a joy, and joy is, I think, a misrecognized. There's a lovely book called, I think it's called Militant Joy, and it talks about how we often conflate joy with happiness, but joy is a very specific kind of emotional flavor that we only get when we move in concert with other people to do
Yeah.
things that we couldn't have done alone.
Yeah.
It's literally what joy means. And if we move from a place of joy instead of the hope of deferred times, right? Like we cannot all be Moses in the desert until the end of this, right? But
Yeah.
if you replace hope with joy, then joy gives you the joy and agency come hand in hand together. We do not have to
Yeah.
just sit here on our asses waiting for shit to change. We could literally be getting out into our communities right now,
Yes.
looking for the agency. And I say this as somebody who has only ever lived in red rural and red
Yeah.
post-industrial areas. So like when people like come to me asking for their hall pass and they're like, "Oh, but I live in a red state." It's like, that's so cute that you thought that I was
Oh
going to give
man.
you a hall pass
Yeah. People need
because
help in
you live
red
in a red
states.
state.
More than anywhere. They wanna hear you. I've got time too, we can go a little long if you've got free time, I don't know what
Sure.
your
Yeah.
schedule's like.
Yeah.
I wanna say too, there's this thing, it's courage too, because the other white supremacy is fear, and they make us, the lesser of two evils type thing. Well, if you don't submit to this, it'll be something worse, and that's basically their whole let's just have the courage to demand something better. And that yes, that gives us joy. So I love that we're kinda organizing those terms. But like then you always see them too. Without us, this system collapses. That
Good.
threat. You're right. Yeah. Well, it's like we are going to be fine without them. And it's like I always go back to like football. I use football because it gets through to white guys. And I'm just like, we traded away that guy. The team was just fine, right? You thought they couldn't win another game without that one, person who was just toxic in the locker room. They got rid of him and they did fine. They actually got better, right? So you've seen this again and again and again. It's not like a guy retires. The Patriots were in the Super Bowl again. They thought they'd never go again after Tom Brady retired, right? He got replaced. We can replace those guys. We can do that. It's like, have some courage. Don't be so. And it's like all these guys that they insist everything is going to be, unlivable without them. They're the ones who won't prove their quality at any point. It's like, prove it. Let's prove it. Let's put another person in.
Right, right. Well, and I think that that's that's the domestic abuse of it all, is it
Yeah,
not? Like, to say,
yeah.
like, you would die without me. You would never be
Oh,
here without
man.
me, right?
Yeah,
It's
oh,
like,
man.
yeah,
Triggered. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, so it's like it's literally, I mean, when I first started telling people in January of 2025, for people that were just arriving to the scene who had not been up to their necks in fascism, and I'm like, fascism is domestic abuse at scale, and they're like, "Oh, that's just a metaphor." I'm like, "No." And now we're living in it, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Now you can see it, right? But yeah, like, I really do, like, I really, I feel like, joy, uh, the accurately defined concept of joy is a much more substantive, and it gets us the world that we actually want. But I have said this on loop, and I mean this. I think people are more afraid of getting out of their door and talking to other people in their neighborhood than they are afraid of fascism, and that they are afraid
yeah.
of climate collapse.
And I think they're indoctrinated to be like that, and that's another thing, aspect of white supremacy. We're not allowed to talk about politics or religion at the dinner table. They reinforce this. Our
Mhm.
indoctrination sets in. So, and even the other day when I was just out skiing and everybody was like, because you say, hiya, hiya, that's skiing. So it's like, hiya. And then I was like, justice for good. I had to force myself to say that. I had to overcome a resistance to say that. It's like, why am I stopping myself from saying this? And that's how we activate everybody. When everybody becomes activated, where they stop listening to that inner voice that has been indoctrinated into them against their will and without their consent, and when they allow themselves to have these conversations with people, and it doesn't have to be it's not like you have to leave and you have to walk to your neighbor and knock on the door and be like, "Hi." It's like I talk to people when I'm at my daughter's basketball games, and, people say it's like somebody came up to me, I was watching one of the practices. He's like, "Are we allowed to be here and watch the practice?" I'm like, "I'm allowed to be here because my daughter is an immigrant, and I'm not gonna let ICE come and kill her." I just said that, and then and there's a lot of guys I've talked to, not really sure, is this person on my side or not? And another part of this is I'm a white guy. I'm 6 feet tall and I'm 220 pounds. So I'm not really worried about any physical altercations. People that are worried about physical altercations, if you're not comfortable doing this, you get a pass. I'm exactly what needs to be having this conversation. And when people start in too, like with their misogynistic bullshit, it's like you don't get a free pass for me. It's like I'm a girl dad. It's like this Nick Fente's bullshit. You start talking about locking up women, and I'll silence him with words and humiliation. I'm going to humiliate a person for saying things like that. And I think we need to give ourselves, and you'll find I've had people come up afterwards, maybe not right then. They've given me hugs. Thank you so much. Can I give you a hug? They'll give me a hug. So you'll find once we overcome that white supremacy conditioning that prevents us from knowing our neighbors and combining with our neighbors and finding our power, once we get over that, you'll realize everybody thinks the way you do. And it's happening. It's gaining momentum. There's a lot more of it now than there was a year ago. There'll be more of it now in 2 months. And it's accelerating because it's starting with one of those doubling effects. People are coming in and they're bringing in more and more and more. So have joy in what's going on. Find your courage. And yeah, you'll feel better too.
Yeah, you absolutely will. I mean, I think that that's the thing, is people are so fixated on telling themselves the story that they live in a red area and that they're surrounded
Yeah.
by
They're
Republicans,
hopeless. Yeah.
that they don't actually look for, it's learned helplessness.
Yeah.
And if you're an adult, you need to shed that. Um, because there are people who are working in your neighborhood doing things that you care about. And all you need to do is have the courage to go out and to find those people. And if and
Yeah.
as a white passing multi-ethnic trans person, if I can find community in red rural areas, you can bet
Yeah.
your sweet ass that the rest of you can, right? Like, I am not here for and I think that is the and I say that this is part of the white supremacy, again, that exceeds a political party, right? Because white supremacy constantly demands that it be coddled and that it be allowed to have
Yes.
excuses for why they get the hall pass for not
Yeah.
having to do any action. That is also white supremacy culture. It's not simply just about remaining silent in the face of bigotry. It is also
Yeah.
looking for the easiest bullshit answer to make yourself fragile and to make yourself helpless when you know damn well that you could be doing something.
Yeah, I call that clansplaining. When the white supremacists justify themselves with their clansplaining. I'll say that, it's like, "Quit clansplaining," and that gets people that gets people to the well, then they're asking you, though. It's like, "What are you even talking about?" It's like, yeah, when you repeat a white supremacy argument as a justification without recognizing it's a white supremacy argument. I'm not doing that. It's like clansplaining again, so you kinda get through to them, and it's not a one-time thing. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, 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 no. It's you're right. I mean, I think that what it is that for the people that I hear doing it are people um are who have grown up in it, right?
Yes.
Who and I would say that in general, I feel like there's a lot of anger and defensiveness from progressive white men who don't want to do anything, and then I think that for progressive white women, um,
Yeah.
they start with the helplessness, and there's nothing that I can do, and I'm all alone. And then the moment that you say, actually, no, there are things that you can be doing in your neighborhood right now, the moment that you confront them, the moment that I do, as someone in this body, boy howdy, will
Yeah.
I just become annihilated by suggesting that action and agency, that your words and actions should align, right?
Yeah.
Because if you are, because you're playing it, you want to have it both ways, where you want to say that you're a good person without ever having to intervene in the world to manifest your beliefs in the world, and that is also white supremacy culture.
Yeah, and that's indoctrinated too to prevent us from forging these, relationships with allies. You'll see this where somebody who's been in a relationship with a narcissist for a long time, when they leave that relationship, they take on the traits of becoming a narcissist with the people that
Mm.
they meet. So it's this intoxicating thing, and, yeah, we just have to encourage each other to find it's like you get into these contests that are like who's the most oppressed, and it's like, look, we don't have to like measure that. Let's just remove all. Let's just join together and remove all oppression. And we get caught up in these things because we're indoctrinated to have that happen. We've got these ruts drilled into our brain, and our thinking only goes there. And you have to kick yourself out of that rut. Like my daughter said the other day when I was getting her prepared for school and getting her these free college classes, she's just like, "It feels like I'm cheating the system." I'm like, yes, the system fucking sucks. The system is here to exploit you and oppress you. Cheat the system. Do whatever the opposite of what the system wants you to do. It's like that means you're on a good track. It's like anything. Buying a car, you can always get a car for a fraction of what it costs at the dealership. The car's going to work great. An example I like to offer is if you go with a friend, go grocery shopping with a friend, like at your grocery store, you'll discover products in that grocery store you've never seen because you train yourself to walk into the grocery store, grab your things and leave. There are worlds of food available at your grocery store. It's like I discovered this, or like when your friends, you'd invite your friends over for your birthday, and they'd bring you these presents. You're like, "Fuck, I didn't know what this present was. I've never seen this before." You're getting things from like other families, and then sharing. That's where our power is. But yeah, we're indoctrinated to be in this, to follow this trail of powerlessness, and then we become experts in that trail. And when people say there's another way, they're like, "How dare you? This is the
Yes.
trail." This is how we do it. This is the way. I get people lecturing me all the time on that.
Yeah, yeah, and I it's a defensiveness that I think is very, firmly, and I mean this with love, but there is it comes from a white progressive space. This notion of there's nothing that we can do, and we're helpless, and all we can do is just wait till midterms, and it's like,
God,
please, you need to understand. I mean, yes, we all need to vote, you know?
yeah, but there's a
But,
lot you can do today. Yeah,
yeah, there's more, right? Because the thing is that we are already hearing from, like, people like even like Mark Elias, who again, like, I've critiqued on here, but he's like, "Listen, you know, they're going there are things that we can do, but his remedies are things that are not gonna be widely adopted, and even if we did all of those things, we still have a mobster, child rapist, white supremacist in the executive branch with everyone around him who is just as illegitimate as he is because he has installed in his
yeah,
cabinet all sorts of people who wouldn't check him because they were also implicated in the Trump Epstein files."
yeah. And I've been trying to address that one way. I've been interviewing as many like candidates running for office as possible. A lot of like progressive candidates are never gonna get any mainstream legacy media attention,
Right.
so I'm like, "Come on here, I'll talk to you." But that also offers me the opportunity to just ask them questions and to bring it into, hopefully, the national dialogue, where I'll just tell them, like, a candidate running for office, it's like, "Okay, if you let's take this hypothetical scenario. If one of your colleagues is credibly accused of raping a child, what's your response going to be?" Like, because we can't, like, just defer from talking about child rape in the context of upcoming elections and things like that. I want politicians who aren't going to, like, well, this guy's been accused of raping a child, but I really need this piece of legislation to be signed to get a win. So I get, no, you don't even open the door for them when they're on the steps into Congress. You're doing everything you can to oppose this person. And that's the issue, that delusion, that centrist, that silver spoon delusion, where they think they aren't, like the white supremacists are going to be coming for them too. They're just going to kill all the rest of us first. So they have to be aware of that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think I think we live in like simplistic thinking sometimes where we assume that if someone holds one set of beliefs or is doing one thing that we might like,
Yeah.
that we cannot critique the other aspects
Yes.
of what they are doing. And I
Yeah.
think and I think that Americans in particular are very are in a are trained into that
Yep.
simplistic thinking, and they get terrified when they get pushed out of it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it's bananas to me.
Well, that's centrist. That's deliberate centrist control mechanism where, and I call it, it's like I'm allowed, and somebody mentions, like, I thought Mark Elias was working very hard. He is. And a lot of the stuff he's doing is great. But we're offering some ideas that he could do to be even more effective. See? And it's like, but yes, the blue, the center, every time we say, hey, maybe you shouldn't listen to James Carville, maybe his racist statements drives people out of your party. They're like, hey, circular firing squad, vote blue no matter who. And then we say, hey, wait, didn't you say vote blue no matter who? But Zoran Mamdani just won. Why aren't you supporting him? Well, and so then they have excuses. So yeah,
They always
they
move the
indoctrinate us.
goalposts.
I'm sorry?
They always move the goalposts. You're right.
Yes. And that's the center. That's our side, the Democrats. And we have to just change. We have to crack that. And there's a lot of tactics we can do to get that. But a big thing is all the people I get who respond to my notes, who are like accusing me of circular firing squad. And like we said, they're the ones repeating the lie that has lost election after election after election, who are insisting that I'm the one who should be blamed for the loss, even though we've never done what I said we should do. We've never embraced the progressive ideas. And just like, we're getting there, though. We're shaking the rust off these minds, I think, because people are just getting so angry, where people are just taking to the streets. And yes, you're right. The majority of people, every time I've gone to a demonstration, are these women in their 60s, and they're just wonderful. They're just like fearless. And I come out with my shirt that says elect women, and they all want to give me a hug. But it's sad because I'm the only man that's out there most of the time, too. And it's just like, but there's more of them every time. And if we can reach them, if all the people here get activated who don't bow down when the centrist Democrats tell us, how dare you? If you don't do exactly what we say, then fascism will be your fault. It's like, that's a fascist argument too. And we have the right to call out the centrist Democrats when they pull that shit. Yeah. Change your own mind and we'll have more power.
Yeah, and I think that the reason why we are here in fascism is one, we've always been a fascist country,
Mhm.
but two, it is only expanded because the centrists, who are also taking money from the oligarchs,
Yeah.
you know, also engage in the narcissism. They're projecting onto everyday people that our anger at being stuck with two
Party.
complicit bodies is that we get what we deserve when they are in fact the architects of our destruction, right? And I want to say too, I don't think that the Democrats are our team. This is what I would say: eat both parties alive from the
Yeah.
inside,
Yeah.
because I don't care if you have to lie and run a sleeper candidate who is Republican to say all of the worst things, and then everyone knows that this person is actually on your side. And I am so done with
Yeah.
this system.
Yeah.
I am
Yeah.
so done, and I honestly think that we are at a point where the 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 infrastructure is so hollowed out that it is literally going to take people learning to create a massive people's shutdown, not where no one goes to work, where we turn all of our resources and give them to each other instead of relying on the government to give us things, so that we starve them of the power and legitimacy that they need, and then watch like roaches on a fucking ship,
Yeah.
or rats on a ship. They are going to flee because they will realize, oh shit, we don't have any power anymore. It's just I just think that there's massive propaganda that makes people think that money and
Yeah.
spyware and guns are the things that are powerful, and that's a lie. You have just been fed propaganda for years that that's power.
Yeah. And
Bananas.
no, you're absolutely right. And it's just like the idea of wealth. We are seeing like the myth of wealth begin to crumble. And I'm just telling you, it's like money is just printed up. I was using the comparison of if you're in a classroom, the teacher hands out points. Those points are meaningless. They just make them
Right,
up, and it's
right.
like, and it would be actually, you could do this experiment, although I don't like doing experiments on your students. You've heard of like the brown eye, blue eye experiment that they
Mhm.
did. Shouldn't do that kind of thing. But it's like, yeah, it's like, oh, I'm just going to hand this kid 1 billion points. Now this kid can distribute. So he's the billionaire. There's always a level above that. But yeah, as we start breaking those things down, because the billionaires will freak out because we have to do all the work, and their robot technology isn't where it needs to be yet. So
Right, and they don't know how to take care of themselves.
yeah, I was listening to what Lefty Prof said. They'll, you know, we'll see, because yeah, they can't do anything. That's absolutely right. I mean, these billionaires who have never once changed the oil. See, that'd be a thing I'd like to see, rather than let's, instead of debates, let's just have like a bunch of basic tasks and see if our candidates can do them. But yeah, this structure where people don't even think to ask for those things. And like, I guess there's so many different ways to approach these big problems. And I really appreciate your thoughts, because they're giving me new ways to think about things. But I'm just like little basic. I think one way this could turn out, I mean, you'll just see white people voting against, because they're gonna limit all the vote except for white people. And maybe white people will just vote Democrat for no real understanding, just I guess I don't like it. And it's like we have this opportunity. I mean, that would be the easy potential. We have this opportunity. People like us who are building our platform now, there's all this institutional change that has to happen. There's all these thoughts. We're just at the start of allowing ourselves to think about the things that could be possible, because we've lived our entire existence under this oppressive mantle of white supremacy that leaves us blinded to so much of reality, because the only thing it allows us to see is this absurd idea that a guy like the monster in the White House is somehow an admirable figure. That's the only thing we're allowed to perceive. And so stripping that veil away, we'll see how the way, but yeah, like you said, climate change is kind of hanging there in the balance too. So it might be that we'll all be gone in 10 years.
Well, and I think and that's the thing that I guess I would encourage people to really, like, ask themselves, like, if you knew you had a decade left to live,
Huh. Yeah. Yeah.
what would you do differently? And I mean this, friends, like, if you because, like, as my friend Aya reminded me today, the only time that we've seen any kind of modicum of movement in the right direction for climate collapse was during COVID. And I think about how we could all collectively just say, no, we are not doing this. No consumption, no anything. We don't need to purchase
Yeah.
anything. We can all stop working, give each other our resources, and just and I know the lefty prof said something like, "Oh, well, they would just drone us." I don't think. I think that that makes assumptions that I think it doesn't. It's not an accurate view of the pillars of support, right, that prop up fascists, because there are only a small number of people that are that unhinged. Oh,
Oh,
okay,
I was
Lefty, I
joking.
didn't know.
Well, I think
Um,
it's an interesting point anyway. Like,
yeah.
but yeah, well, go
Okay,
ahead.
so it was a countervailing, yeah, but, like, so Lefty, you it was still a point but it is still a point that people have made. Well, if
Yeah.
we don't obey them, they will join us. So I'm glad that you did bring it up, because I think that the thing is that a lot of people do. Maybe you were actually repeating that because you've heard it, but I hear people say, well, if we don't obey them, it will get worse, and it's like, no. it will. So there are not very many white Christian nationalists, and Donald Trump may want to annihilate the rest of the world,
Yeah.
right? But the people who are propping him up are mainly cowards, and when they see
Yeah.
an entire group of people that are like, no, we're not fucking doing this anymore. Especially, I mean, like when you look at the climate, these people that are like, actually, right now, billions of people are going to die. We've got 10
Yeah.
years left. We need to start working and building community. So when I talked to and developed the daisy chain, I wasn't just doing it about trying to shut down this authoritarianism that is killing people, but it's also killing the planet, but also because we need to develop hyperlocal
Yeah.
systems of support so that the people who do survive climate collapse are not in a zombie apocalypse world where they've got guns and they're like, I've got mine and fuck you, because that will literally lead to everyone dying.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, we need to develop these ways to sort of work together, and I want to hope that we can all learn to move together, to be able
Yeah.
to build power together, and then to be like, "Oh, we don't have to accept this bullshit anymore."
I th That's a wonderful, and I love the bigger. I'll have to share when I do the replay, I have to share your article, the daisy chain article. But I mean, that's a larger concept. And so, like, I like to give people activism for just this moment. And I
Yeah.
think, like, just encouraging people, it's like cancel those subscriptions, cancel the subscriptions to we saw what happened with Jimmy Kimmel. I mean, this is just like the first thing that came into my head, the thing we can do, because our enemies are these obscenely wealthy people that can't exist without our, like, obedience, are indoctrinated. This is indoctrinated obedience. And little by little, we can peel that away. And like you were saying, I mean, the farmers market, like the people in your area, buy your food, don't go to the grocery store, like, and stopping your subscribing to any billionaire, like the people or the millionaires, the people still subscribing to Adam Kinzinger. It's like that guy's got millions already. He doesn't need your money. He's not really going to help us. He's a status quo guy. And just having these conversations at these demonstrations about these little acts that you can take, those add up. Those are the things that make a big difference. And just getting people on the path. I mean, yeah, if you can share your weirdo friend's article on the daisy chain, that would be great. But there's a lot of things leading up to that, just like these ideas of little ways that we can take back some of our economic power. Ultimately, it comes down to that. Like the idea, we've seen the limits of violence in the strongman attack on Ukraine. We always live in fear of these massive military forces. We spend that $1 trillion on the U.S. military because white supremacists are afraid to enter any contest that they haven't rigged. So that's why we waste all that money on that. We need that money to develop education, to survive a climate apocalypse. But we saw it.
Yeah.
Russia was supposed to roll right over the Ukraine. They're still fighting. Because when people come to try to take over your home, the place where you live, you see what real strength is, and it's in the people. It's always been
Yeah.
in the people. And we've been trained not to believe that. We have to remind ourselves of it.
Yeah, yeah, and if I also wanna talk about a different kind of subscription service, if I will, which is, and I did this as a joke, but not a joke, joking, not joking. Um, uh, uh, when I recorded a video, and it said, "Boycott men until morale improves," and what I mean by that is that, like, women and femmes have a subscription service to masculinity,
Oh,
and,
yeah.
I want to, and it's not just about, like, the Liz Estrada of, abstaining from romantic relationships. This Women have more purchasing power now in the United States than, any other demographic. If women in particular, women and femmes and queer people, and trans people all stopped buying shit and said,
Yeah.
"No, fuck this shit," it would it would decimate the rich in a way that nothing else could. And also, if you are a woman, if you're a trans person, if you're a queer person and you are in relationship where your role involves propping up a man, just stop doing it. Just
Yeah.
let him fall on his face. And I mean this, like, because so much, so I mean, it is a literal tangible thing that women can do, is just
Yes.
stop buying shit.
Yeah.
Stop buying shit. So,
Yeah.
just
A lot of these abusive relationships and the things like you said. Yeah, but somebody put it, it's like other countries have social safety nets and America has women where they just make them, and everything is a two income household, and in addition to that, it's just all these expectations. A lot of it is the structure that makes that possible, that kind of abuse possible. With my daughters too, I'll often say it's like you're always I would tell them it's like are you gonna turn over your economic power to some man? And it's like, look at the boys in your class. Would you trust any of those boys in your class to be in charge of your money? Hell no, daddy. So they know that. But yeah, keeping empowering women more any way we can do it. Yeah. Be safe though too. It's gonna be ugly, I think.
Yeah, yeah, I think it absolutely will be, but I think that part of the reason why it this is the moment. I feel like, you talked about, and I know that I commented on your thing. You were like, certainly we're near a breaking point, but what I want to suggest is that we're near a tipping point, and the moment where people are ready to get into their communities and also to stop purchasing things. Like, I mean, hear me once more, women and femmes, that much of like what you have been encouraged to buy is because white supremacy culture and
Yeah.
patriarchy has told you about all these things that you lack, and they've taught you to
Yeah.
like try to make yourselves more attractive when really those beauty standards were built around child rape, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just like you don't need to purchase anything to stand in your worth, you know?
Yeah.
Just good golly.
Oh,
So yeah, and I'm glad that you end with agency. And also, Walt, I want to amplify the thing that you said about calling the churches. That
yeah.
is brilliant, and that is work that I would argue that like white men in particular uh, ought to be doing. Is that, and I would love to see you write a piece about that if you haven't yet,
Yeah. I'm trying to remember if I
talking
did.
about that, what you've been doing there, because where you've been calling the churches and being like, hey, listen,
Yeah.
because that is a model for, because one of the central pillars of support that is propping up this moment is Christianity.
Yeah. Well, and you call churches. I wrote one too about calling up your local police force and saying, "Hey, does
Hmm.
it bother?" I said, "Does it bother you that ICE is getting so much more money? They get all this money. You guys had to do all this." And you can kind of tap into that grievance mentality of the right because most of the time, people that are working in law enforcement are going to be right leaning. But you're like, "Hey, does it bother you? You had to go through years of training, and yet you're getting paid a fraction of what ICE is getting paid." And it's like, also, I've also said to them, when ICE comes to get my kid out of the school, are you worried that they might knock your kid down? You know, maybe your kid's gonna lose. Not actually telling them to protect my kid, but just putting it in the context of what's gonna happen to them. But yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And if you have children, especially young children, I want to encourage you to have them create drawings that say protect and serve
Oh,
and mail
yes.
them en masse to your local
Yes.
police precinct. The same thing, uphold your oath to the Constitution, like mailing these physical copies of drawings from kids that are literally inducing people who are being complicit, who are cowards, to
Yes.
experience their shame and recognize what they're
Yes.
doing, because I think that, and also if you are an editorialist, I would actually in this moment be like, you know what, we're actually
Yeah.
currently not accepting editorials from people who are over the age of 18, but we would love to hear about what young people want to see in the
Oh,
world,
wow.
and then amplify that, right? There's
Yeah.
so many things that we can be doing. Peaceful
Right.
resistance is endless, right? But the moment that you choose violence, then you're on a battlefield that you're
Oh.
guaranteed to
Oh,
lose.
absolutely. And people, and I mean, again, Americans are indoctrinated to think violence is the only thing. That's the only thing that appears in our propaganda media. That's why
Mhm,
people that write books about kindness don't get publishing contracts. So we're
mhm.
indoctrinated to be violent so that then they can attack us and have their martial law. So we have to cheat the system, as we said. Get your mind out of that. Oh, Willful just came here. A lot
Yeah,
of
there
people
you
always
go.
say, like, "Hi, Will." A lot of people say, call your representatives, but yeah, also call your churches, call your school, and encourage teaching real history. Call your police station. You know, ask them to protect your kids. There's a lot of people you can call, especially because people ask things you can do in your house if you don't want to go out and talk to other people. You don't feel comfortable with that, and writing these letters. And the other thing is that illusion of authority. Like all these guys, they think they're untouchable because their identity is hidden. Well, local law enforcement, we know where they are, you know, we know what their names are. So you just a reminder, not a threat, but a reminder that it's like your kids go to the same school my kids go to. We're in this community together. You know, we have to live together after this ends. And you know, accountability comes for evil acts and unethical behavior and cruelty. It might take a long time, but the universe sees that shit, and it's like it rots you from the inside. We've seen that. It makes them transgress even worse. But this is why we have to get rid of that decorum mindset that tells us we have to let bygones be bygones for the sake of some bipartisanship and just freaking hold lawbreakers accountable for a change. But make those calls, everybody, and send those letters and just and continue to have those conversations with people around you, and it does. It accumulates. It has a cumulative effect.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does. Well, this has always been I
Yeah,
love
I could
talking
keep
to
you.
you. Let me know the next time you want to be on the horn together. I enjoy
Absolutely.
this,
I could
and,
kidnap you all day and just have these talks all day long, so
yeah.
I'll let you
Well,
keep
thank
going.
you. It's mutual, and thank you everyone for being here with us, this, fine Tuesday,
Yeah.
early afternoon.
So a lot of
So,
people showed up, so hopefully a little bit of action. Let's see 250 letters to the editor
yeah.
I mean, that makes a big difference. It really does.
Oh, it makes an enormous difference, and I think it's much more powerful, by the way, if you ask your children to lead those efforts because
Oh,
kids,
yes.
have more audacity and, there's a power to them that adults just simply don't have, but,
Absolutely, and you
well,
can get through, and we're seeing that with the Epstein files too. It is melting some cold hearts. People
yeah,
can't stand to see it, so
yeah,
keep up the good fight and have fight with joy and fight with courage, right? That's the thing, and we're
yeah,
gonna keep resisting because there's no other alternative but victory.
yes, exactly.
Oh, thank you so much. All right, we'll live, Pippa. I'll let you go. Thank you, everybody. It's so lovely to see you
Thank
all.
you.
Always great to have you, my friend, my weirdo friend. We embrace the word weird because it's
Yes,
diversity and it's wonderful. So
yes,
weird is wonderful. All right,
yes.
thank you
Yeah,
all. Bye.
bye.